Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Maybe you're coming from another dimension, or maybe you're chilling out on planet Neptune. Welcome to another thrilling episode of Fireside Chats. Ancient Mysteries Unearthed is the channel you're on today. Today, we embark on an extraordinary journey as we dive into the fascinating realms of sunken civilizations. From the depths of the ocean, where the submerged ruins of Yanaguni off the coast of Japan lie shrouded in mystery, to the intriguing enigma of the Bimini Road near the Bahamas, to the captivating secrets hidden beneath the waters off the coast of Egypt, we explore the remnants of these lost worlds. Join us as we navigate the waters, examining the fascinating formations, intricate structures that defy conventional explanations. We'll uncover the clues left behind by these ancient civilizations, seeking to understand their origins, cultures, and the untold stories that lie hidden beneath the waves. So, grab your diving gear and perhaps a cup of hot cocoa, and get ready for another amazing episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed Fireside Chats. Chris, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic, Brandon. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody to the show today. It's really exciting. It's going to be a fun one again.
Yeah, I'm excited. So tonight we're doing sunken civilizations, and that's always a really, really, really fun topic because they're there. They're just there.
Yeah, they're there and they beg the question as to why are they there? And the obvious, reason behind this is that they once weren't underwater. And now there's also the topic of perhaps beings that do live underwater. And we can get into that in another episode. But today we're focusing on these sunken civilizations, civilizations that were once above water and are now underwater, begging the question how, why, and when did these things happen? Because it really does play that other story that we aren't sold in the mainstream, which is we likely go in cycles with our civilization. We come and we go, the civilizations come and they go. And some of the remnants are found underwater because the climate of this planet changes all the time. And that's also something that we're just coming back to grips with as a collective consciousness, let's say.
Well, it's interesting too, and it's a stark reminder that that the planet does what the planet does, and we aren't always in control, no matter how much we might have economic support. The Earth doesn't understand what money is, and it will change as it sees fit. So, it's a very interesting thing too to me when I look at these underwater sites. It really goes to kind of like a Graham Hancockian view of this world of the timelines that we are told and taught aren't rigid. They are probably inaccurate at best, if not totally wrong. So it's very interesting to see that these sites, and like you said, this is high civilization. And do we have records of the water levels changing? You know, you look at things like the Parthenon in Greece; they're way up on these acropolises and stuff. And is there a reason for that? Was that built after maybe a great flood? Was there these great floods? We kind of know there's lots of ancient literature that talks about these things, but let's dive right in, shall we?
Yes, pun intended, Brandon. Let's dive into these murky waters of the sunken civilizations. And you're right, Graham Hancock is one of the major researchers that comes up. Of course, I would say his research hit the mainstream when he went on the Joe Rogan show, and we have actually a clip of that to show you folks today when he's with Randall Carlson. And Carlson, being a geologist, brings a very important piece of evidence that other geologists, including a friend of the show, Dr. Robert Schoch, and more, who's also a geologist, all talk about the incredible amounts of geological evidence left around the world. So we're also going to dive into that today because geology is one of the best friends of archaeology, and it's also an example of we need cross disciplinary approaches to, I'd say, every issue and every challenge and every mystery that we're trying to unsolve on this planet. And archaeology is no different. Archaeology is treated as a singular discipline, but I have friends who are archaeologists who agree that they need other sciences, especially the ones like geology, to help them uncover this puzzle. And, I would think, well, for today, before we get into the science, and there's so much science to go through, let's go through some of the myths, some of the legends, because those are equally as important. And there's so many to go through. I want to acknowledge that a lot of oral traditions, indigenous people, First Nations people all around the world have hundreds of these stories, hundreds of these great flood myths, of these biblical mythological cataclysms that are only mythological because they happened so long ago. You know, I think I've said it in other episodes, J.R.R. Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings series says a line of, myth becomes legend, legend or story, and fact became story, story became myth, myth became legend, and over thousands of years these stories just dissolved out of history altogether. And the only way we stand a chance at reconciling this and also just remembering these events are through stories like what we now know as let's say the biblical flood myth. So it is a myth and a story shared all around the world. And can we find major written evidence of this? Yeah, absolutely. We can go into the Bible. We can also go into Hindu texts, and we can also go into Sumerian texts. We have the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood myth. I'll just read a little bit here from the Ancient Origins website. So Enlil, the highest god, decided to completely destroy the whole world by means of a great flood, as the humans had increasingly become noisy. Ea, the god who created human beings of divine blood and clay, warned Unapithstim, did not pronounce that right, but that's okay, secretly about the flood and gave him instructions to build a boat and be saved. Sounds similar to the Bible's story of Noah and the great flood. And that's in the book of Genesis. And that was written that Yahweh, the name of the monotheistic God of the Israelites, who created man from dust, decided to bring the great flood to earth because of mankind's increasing corruption. Now, Yahweh was, however, pleased with Noah and instructed him to create an ark for saving humans and animals. On completion of the ark, Noah, his entire family, and 2 of every type of animal on earth entered the ark. Once the door of the ark was closed, the destructive flood started and cleared all other living beings from the face of the earth. After the flood ended, everyone inside the ark came out, and Yahweh promised never to subject humans to something like the great flood ever again. Now, according to Hindu mythology, there's a story about Manvatara Sandhya, the great flood. In this story, Vishnu, Matsya Avatar, warned Manu, the first man, about the impending flood and instructed him to construct a giant boat. Again, so similar. It sounds like I'm just repeating the same story, which maybe I am. Now, according to Zoroastrian Mazdasim, now he tried to destroy the whole world by means of a drought. It is believed that Mithra shot an arrow at a rock and the flood poured out. Only one man, along with his cattle, survived the flood in an ark. Okay, so we've got so many stories. We've got Plato with Timaeus describing a flood that is also quite similar. And it just continues to, and we've got, again, the Titan Prometheus who created humans with clay. I mean, this creation myth is also prevalent. That's a whole other podcast in of itself. But we've basically got lots and lots of these myths, okay, that they talk about certainly at least one massive cataclysm, if not multiple major and then several less major cataclysms throughout the last, known history of humanity. And with geology, we can actually start to uncover how long ago that may have been. Plato talks about the Great Flood happening roughly around 12,500 years ago in his own writing. But the interesting thing is then when we look over at some of this research, I'm switching over now to Graham Hancock's website, and he's looking at a disaster, a cataclysm that happened, roughly 12,800 or 12,500 years ago, something in that ballpark. So the same ballpark that Plato gave us that we consider myth, all right, Plato is weird because we consider some things that Plato says as historical. He's arguably, him and some of his family members are some of the first historians that we recognize in Western history, at least. Yet then he says other things that we are like, no, that's myth. He never said that was myth, although he was referring to stories that his his grandfather had received from visits to Egypt, and when the Egyptian wisdom keepers were letting him know that, like, oh, you guys, you Greeks don't have the full story of humanity. It's much, much longer than you think. So going into the science, going into the evidence here, Graham Hancock talks about these ice sheets that covered most of North America and spanned over the entire world during the last ice age, of course. Now, some of these ice sheets may have been hit by an impact. Now, Graham Hancock talks a lot about the impact theory that ended the last ice age. And there's other theories as well, like a solar flare. For example, Dr. Robert Schoch talks about a solar-induced dark age with a solar flare that hit the planet. But regardless of what the let's say the mechanics of what happened are, what seems to be definitely the case is that something happened around 12,500 years ago. Okay. And let's say, so looking at the impact theory, Graham talks about some of these fragments of this asteroid were 2 kilometers or more in diameter, and they hit the Earth like a blast from a cosmic scattergun around 12,800 years ago. This was near the end of the last ice age, from which our world has been emerging into a pleasant warming phase. But the impact set in train a kind of nuclear winter and plunged the planet back into a period of deep cold and darkness that lasted until around 11,500 years ago. So we're talking almost 1,000 years of nuclear darkness, nuclear winter that would have happened after this cataclysm.
Oof.
Right?
I mean, I think January to March is a long time. Wow.
Well, you hear these stories, right, of the of people having to go underground and living for generations underground.
Well, that's a good point. You know, when we look at those underground cities, we never really think about them escaping cold. It's usually we think about asteroids or roaming barbarians or something, but never to escape the cold, which is what you would do. I mean, if you're a farmer and you have cabbages and you want to store them outside in your field, you bury them. You know, so it's very interesting. And you know what? This is once again, whenever we have these pan-cultural references, it just, to me, it adds so much validity to the topic. When I hear, I can basically throw a stone at any continent in the world and they're going to have a flood myth.
Exactly.
So it's very, very interesting stuff. And then Graham Hancock, for if our listeners don't know who Graham Hancock is, check him out. He's got some great stuff. You might not agree with all of his points, but he does make great, compelling arguments as well. So, Graham, if you're out there, keep up the good work, keep up the good fight.
Yeah, I saw Graham lecture back in Toronto many years ago, and that was
I was with you.
I know you were, my friend. It was a real special day. We had a great time, and that was right after he had gone on the Joe Rogan show. So it was a sold out crowd. It was kind of like seeing a rock star. I mean, anyone that's into alternative history, you're likely to have heard of Graham. He's arguably one of the most famous. And I love his research. However, I like to go even deeper than a lot of the stuff. Graham he gets attacked the most because he's one of the most famous. And because of that, I think he has to stay a little conservative with his theories.
I think so too. I think it's a financial thing too. I think he's trying to sell books, which I understand, which is what the reason why most of academia is not talking about what we talk about on this show. It's because it's actually bad for business. Good for business if you want to, go into a small little conspiracy bookstore, but if you want to be widely published. So Graham was talking about mounds during his lecture, and I brought up giants. I asked a question, and I remember he was like, "I've never heard of that," and I'm like, "Really? You've never heard of giant bones and mounds? Like that's the number one thing I think about."
Yeah, he was doing his America Before, I think, tour for that book.
He was. Yes,
and it's a great book. And then there's amazing research in there, Serpent Mound, and all these amazing like astronomical alignments. And we're getting a little off topic here, but that's whatever. It's a podcast, and it's like great, awesome, Graham, and it's amazing research. Thank you for all that. And
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And where is the mention of giants? Because almost every single mound on the face of North America has a story and has myths and legends of giants who built them. I mean, it's just, you can't escape it.
Just look up the Abe Lincoln quote at Niagara Falls, and he even mentions them. So, I mean, all the primary documents, all this, and to our viewers, we know you like Giants. We see the view counts. We know you like the Giants. So, all right, let's pop back into it. So, where are we going to go first? Let's
So
check out an ancient site.
So I wanted to quickly pull this up as you were mentioning it, Brandon, before we get into some of these other topics here, because this is an example of an underground city. All right, this is an example of what we had to do as a species. I mean, this is called Derinkuyu. It's one of the most famous. It's in Turkey. I will go one day. This is a artist rendition of the surface you can see here at the top, and then all these layers. And it's much like most of these sites, it is built over time. So lots of layers are of different age. They can't really date it yet, so we don't know how old it is, but it's pretty damn old. It could have been as old as it could have been built during the end of the last ice age as a bunker, really.
Well, and you
You,
can't carbon date stone too, so
it's
there
certainly not,
are
yeah.
problems that arise with trying to guess ages. And if you look at these structures, if you had a couple hundred years in there, you get busy eventually. Just keep going.
Yeah, I mean these things are huge. They could have housed what they estimate tens of thousands of people, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and livestock, and they figured out how to get fresh air down there. I mean,
And I was in
humans are
Malta, and
amazing.
humans are amazing. We really are quite adaptive and inventive and creative species. And this is just a great example of one of the many underground cities. There's lots in India, more and more being uncovered all around the world. Malta, like I said, where I was recently, and so on and so forth. So these are just examples of almost in a way a reaction to these cataclysmic geological events happening throughout the last 12,500 years. And I'm sure throughout, well, as we know, throughout Earth's history altogether, we've got the end of the dinosaurs and other events like that throughout Earth's history as well. So something to consider. So let's go into the science. All right. Now, this is a really interesting website. This is actually the website's very dense scientifically. So I'm just going to touch on it right now. Keep things light and a bit more entertaining for you, beautiful audience watching this. But it's a really interesting site if you do want to dig into this Greenland ice core sample. This is one of the best pieces of evidence that we have to date. That's just hard scientific evidence to support a lot of the climate activity that we've witnessed on this planet for tens of thousands, upward to close to probably a million years. So this, I'll just read the abstract, and this website, it will be in the show notes. Check it out. Highly dense information, but it's all there. This is the place where they've done the study. So I highly recommend checking this out if this is something you're into. Basically, what they're saying is one of the explanations of the abrupt cooling episode known as the Younger Dryas is a cosmic impact or airburst at the Younger Dryas boundary that triggered cooling and resulted in other calamities, including the disappearance of the Clovis culture and the extinction of many large mammal species. So this is the ice core samples that basically tell us that also around 12,500 years ago, right when Plato tells us that the end of the last ice age happened, but when he tells us that the biblical Great Flood happened, this is when these ice core samples are also telling us further on in this abstract. I'm just giving you guys the basics here, but basically what they're saying is that we know through these ice core samples where you have these different layers, almost like you're reading I don't even know, like a scientific documentation of Earth's climate history. It's really amazing how the ice just solidifies these different layers of activity throughout the planet. And so what we see is that there was a massive warming that happened very abruptly to end the last ice age. And that's what led to these extinctions of larger mammals, megafauna, and the Clovis culture, which were a hunter-gatherer human species. So this is one big piece of evidence. Check it out in the show notes below. I've also got in nature.com, which is obviously a very prestigious scientific journal and website. They talk about Earth's climate during the last ice age, and that you've got these really famous graphs here that show these fluxes in the last in the warmer versus cooler periods. And then you also get these real big dips of sea level and then rises of sea level, as you can see here. And one of the things that we need to really consider with these underwater civilizations is the rising and the lowering of sea levels. And right now, with what we've experienced for the last 12,500 years, is a rise in sea levels. So sea levels are rising and rising and rising, and they actually rose quite abruptly at certain spikes that we can see in this graph here. And so what that really means is that basically these places that were underwater weren't always underwater. And we gotta remember that. Like, why would these things be underwater? Well, because they were once above water not so long ago, and which implies that they were pretty advanced civilizations during the last ice age. And just don't forget, the last ice age wasn't just this cold terrain all across the world. Around the equator would have been quite temperate, very livable, very hospitable places for people to live. So it wasn't like the whole planet was covered in ice. A lot of it was, but there were places that were quite moderate, warm, nice places to live. Actually, right around where Egypt and places like that are, were fertile, lush, very livable, quite hospitable, habitable places for people. So don't
Yes,
forget that.
and humans are quite adaptable, as we said. And I know here in Ontario, even some escarpments or higher ground, they do have remnants of civilization throughout what we would have deemed as an ice age as well. So as soon as they got the opportunity, they were spreading out. Humans are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's give ourselves a pat on the back, everybody. We're doing great, even now. You know, it might not look like it because the mainstream doesn't like to make us look good, but we're pretty awesome. So,
Well, yeah.
and so I'm going to switch over here to NASA. Going to get a couple. This is just a bit more pieces of evidence. I just want to show everyone that there's a lot of science to dive into when it comes to these theories that, that there was once great civilizations, and then they fall because of natural or, man-made situations. So we've got the legacy of the mega flood. And here we've got this landscape in eastern Washington state, 60-mile long Grand Coulee. And this is the largest stair step canyons. And they basically look over this majestic scenery and beg the question of, well, how did these things get here? So that question is followed up on by certain scientists. And what a trained geologist has seen when looking at this is that there was once water here. These dry, arid lands definitely had water at one point. We're going to show you a video in a minute too on the Joe Rogan show with Randall Carlson, going more into that of a different area, but similar to North America. And so that was the mainstream view around the 1922 was that there was once water here. And so there's more and more research that went into these things. And this, I believe the scientist's name was Bretz. And the more unusual landforms he continued to find. So these winding channels that split off into smaller and smaller branches, crisscross with each other, and sometimes join each other again here and there inside the canyons. Peculiar hills shaped like prow of a boat, fan-shaped fields and debris on the canyon floor, and more. So he began to realize that the slow-acting erosion by a river could not adequately explain it all. So that's the thing with geology. They say, and this is the way we're taught in school, that geology is very, very slow, and it is, and it can also happen really, really fast. So it's not just the super slow stuff that happens in geology. Oh, over millions of years, the ice sheets carved out these mountains, and that's why they're here. It's like, well, yes, and things like earthquakes, tsunamis, mud floods, and so many like solar flares, asteroid impacts.
Well, Chris, just remember that Chris and I were on a canoe trip on Georgian Bay, and we were staying on an island out in the middle. We were 8 kilometers from the shore on open water in a canoe and a kayak. And we got there and it was great. We had this big rock beach and it was amazing. The waves, the wind picked up and the waves were crashing. And then the next day, our beach was gone. It was just gone. So yeah, that happened overnight.
Yeah, basically, right? And these tides and everything. I mean, like things just all of a sudden can shift pretty quickly, and all of a sudden, the water is gobbling up what was once there. So it's very easy to have this happen. So again, you can follow up more on this article. This just goes into some more of NASA's really, pretty standard evidence here. one last little bit. This is actually moving up to Canada. This is an article in the Daily Mail, which has got lots of ads, so apologies for those. But basically, the headline says, experts find evidence of 12,000-year-old flood of epic proportions that drained an ancient lake at a rate of more than 800 Olympic swimming pools per second. So a 12,000-year-old flood that did this may have pushed Earth back into an ice age. Glacial Lake Agassiz spilled into the Clearwater Athabasca Spillway. The lake covered 580,000 square miles and was formed after the Laurentide ice shield melted around 6,000 years ago. It's likely the catastrophic meltwater to drain into the Arctic Ocean, and it actually occurred over a 6 to 9 month period. So once again, evidence of pretty quick geology, 6 to 9 months. That's not.
Yeah, and 12,000 years ago, there's that number again.
This is what we got to pay attention to. This number keeps coming up, and then it starts to connect to these mythological stories, or quote unquote mythological stories, especially Plato, who's giving us specifically that date. And now we're seeing more and more geology, following up on this. So, and now they're saying this happened around some 13,000 years ago. So this is actually up in, this is University of Alberta found this up in Canada. So it just goes on to talk about this ancient lake, which no longer exists. It covered a huge area up in Saskatchewan, all the way up to Alberta. And they have found evidence of a 12,000-year-old flood that drained this lake at extremely fast speeds. Again, 800 Olympic swimming pools per second. That's pretty incredible. So this is just another piece of evidence. Look into this more. The link for this article will be down in the show notes. But I want to show a video now of a geologist, Randall Carlson, talking about some more geologic evidence to support this theory. And I just want to show you all of this stuff right now before we get to the cool underwater archaeology itself, which will be the second half of the show. Don't worry. This stuff is so important, though, to digest, because once you see it here, trust me, you're going to see it all over the world. And this is the cool thing, is to have this perspective to be able to take with you and then start to see all this evidence of an epic flood that clearly happened, probably multiple times throughout history, but definitely 12,000 years ago. And it just so happens to line up with all these ancient stories, folklore, oral history, traditions, etc. All of these puzzle pieces start to come together, and it gives you a much better sense of the human story. So let's take about 2 minutes of this video here. And yeah, I'm going to hope that I said sharing sound. I'm going to start playing it. Brandon, give me the thumbs up if we got it going here, okay?
Yeah. There's a big thumbs down on that sound there, brother.
All right, cool. So we'll just exit here and start it again.
And you see a basin in the background, right? Okay, right here on top of this hill and down on the side here, you see that there are some quarrying operations. Those are quarrying gravel, because everything you're looking at here, this whole landscape between the hills, are these large masses of gravel, trillions of tons of gravel. And you're going to notice down here a series of ripples.
Oh, okay, I see that.
You start seeing the ripples on the landscape. Piece of land like a tongue coming out. That's a delta. You know what a delta is? It's when a river comes into a body of water and it's carrying sediment. And because the river is moving along swiftly, it's carrying the sediment, but when it comes into the standing body of water, it slows down and it drops its sediment. It builds a delta. The whole city of Portland, for example, is built on a giant delta, right? New Orleans is built on a delta, right? Okay.
Just jumping in quickly. So these ripples at the bottom of the screen are what he's talking about. You can see them also up in the middle. Just keep that in mind. So these ripples, what do they look like? Do they remind you of anything you've seen on a beach, perhaps?
So what we're seeing there is a delta. And then in front of it, we're seeing rippled landscape. So
rippled landscape that looks exactly like the beach looks.
That's the thing, it's fractal, because this is the whole mystery of this, that this happens at a scale of inches on beaches and a scale of hundreds of feet here.
Right here in the middle, you see a massive delta.
Yes.
Spewed out like a big tongue, splayed out. And then right down here, you start seeing the ripples. And there's a farmhouse. You see the farmhouse there? Now those ripples are, the tallest ones are about the height of a 5-story building.
Whoa. How bizarre. These things, they're the size of a 5-story building. What is that, like 70 feet or something
50
like that? 50 feet?
50
okay. So those are 50 feet high. And how much water?
We'll get to that. Let's see the rest of it.
And these are just dirt, right?
They're well, if you dig into one, what you're going to find is they're a massive. Okay, yeah.
Whoa.
Look at this.
This is crazy.
This is totally crazy. This is one of the craziest things you'll ever see.
These ripples, the repeated ripples in an area where there's nothing else like it.
This is the fingerprints of the flood. That's what it is.
Wow. Where can someone look at this?
So they're spelling it out to us there. And as Graham Hancock, you can hear in the background, says, it's a great episode, of course, check it out on Joe Rogan. Graham Hancock says that this is the fingerprints of the flood. This is the evidence, right? It's Graham's quite a great writer, obviously a great poet, and he phrases it really well. Just like he says, we're a species with amnesia,
as Graham says
as Graham says it. I'm not like Canadians over here, but a species with amnesia is a really good thing to also remember, especially with this topic, because, well, for a lot of reasons. First of all, this is clearly a story that is echoed throughout every culture around the world. There's got to be a reason for that. And two, don't forget, we have this thing called epigenetic DNA, which means our DNA can remember up to many, many generations, and we're discovering it remembers even more. So maybe it remembers an infinite amount of our generations. I don't know, but certainly up to 40 to 50 generations back, our DNA can remember. And perhaps it remembers some of these cataclysms. What if there is not just a collective amnesia, but there's like a trauma, a global trauma from, just imagine something like this. You have to use your imagination, because nothing like this has ever even, thank God, come close to happening in our lifetime. Certainly disasters have happened, but this one is wipes out 90% of all life on this whole planet, really. And that's huge.
Think of the biblical flood, right? It's like you hear things of like the Great Reset. Well, that was
the
Great Reset. That reset it, and it wasn't us who chose it. So
no.
And if a natural event happens where it wipes out 90% of the world, the remaining people, of course they're going to suggest that it was divine intervention, right? It's just too big of a scale to comprehend.
It's also such a big trauma. Again, like, think that's just everyone on the whole planet is going to suffer through that, and is going to remember it, and also is going to make so many different gestures and actions to remember that story. So think about how many cultures, one of their most important stories that they still tell to this day is that flood myth. Well, why? Because wouldn't we want to make sure we remember that, and remember what we came from, and to remember that we did come from perhaps a high civilization that was thrown into chaos through this event?
Just think of it, Chris. Okay, so you're sitting there, you're warm in your bed, you have electricity. Let's just put it in today's standard, because they were probably at a higher level of civilization. So you have all this comfort, you have secure food, your family, you're all talking about what you want to do when you grow up, you have all these choices. This flood comes through, rips 10 family members away from you, a few of them survive. You don't have a bed anymore, you don't have a house, you don't have electricity, you don't have your Call of Duty, you don't have bananas in the fridge, you don't have bread baking in the oven. All of a sudden you're going around going, holy crap, like, did anyone find any snails that we can eat for dinner tonight as we huddle under this one remaining oak tree on the top of this hill? My God. And then you have to build from there, because your universities are gone, your elders are gone, probably. You don't have that foundation of society that we take for such granted, right? Because our view of society is that we've been doing, now we're kind of taking off, but that's all been based on the foundations, going back to the fact that we have writings from Plato. A great flood, guess what? All your writings, even your internet, it's gone. So
especially the internet.
Yeah, especially the internet.
All of our digital stuff is gone, and the only thing that's left is what was built physically. And that's why do you think the ancients loved to build in stone? Because it lasts. I
wonder if they didn't have things like the internet, or even AI. And you think of, like, intelligence. There are stories in ancient Greece about mechanical beings that were
Yeah.
sentient. So
Mhm.
I wonder if we didn't have something from before that was lost. It's very interesting.
Is a lot of what is happening right now, is it rediscovery? I think a lot of this is rediscovery. Are where we're at right now, are we rebuilding a civilization, kind of Atlantis 2.0 or 5.0 or 10.0? I mean, how many times have we even gone through this? So let's go into some of these actual places that we have found underwater. Let's start with Bimini Road. I'm going to play a quick video here from YouTube channel Paranormal Post with Clayton Morris. I love Clayton Morris's show Redacted as well. Him and his wife do a really great job just sifting through all the craziness in this planet, but he does enjoy his paranormal stuff, and I found a video that he touches on the Bimini Road. This is a bit of a history on the Bimini Road site, and then we'll get into some of the evidence. Pretty interesting stuff.
Lost forever. Now, for hundreds of years, the story of Atlantis has captured our attention. The famed lost city makes its first appearance in the works of Plato as the defeated opposition to the Athenians. But this is mythology. But is there any truth to this story at all? Could the answers lie in the waters of the Bahamas?
All right.
Oh, you having your own cataclysm on your internet there.
Yeah, well, I'm going to let it load perhaps, but what Clayton's talking about basically is this myth of Atlantis, right? That we've been taught about through Plato. And one of the biggest questions that comes out, of course, is where is Atlantis? Now, my theory is that Atlantis was a global civilization. So you're going to see evidence of Atlantis everywhere. And it's more of a question of what major cities perhaps were of Atlantis. And I think one of the major cities and one of the major areas is this, what we can see here on the map, on the east coast of the United States. These close to these Bimini Islands, you can see on the right-hand side here. And the reason being is that they found these, what would be called roads, old ancient roadways. Let's just play this video again and see if the Wi-Fi is going to work for us, and see what else, Clayton talks about here with these Bimini roads, because this is the really fascinating information.
Is the Bimini Islands, and on those islands sits large ancient stone formations submerged beneath crystal waters. Researchers, geologists, archaeologists, and scientists alike have visited and studied the huge flat stones off of the coast of Bimini, known as the Bimini Road. They've tried to, for years, to figure out whether these limestone blocks are a natural phenomenon or evidence of an ancient lost civilization. Now, Bimini is an island in the Bahamas, part of a chain of islands 50 miles east of Miami, Florida. A mere 20 feet down in the blue waters off the coast, a stone path can be found. Large, flat rocks cut at right angles, seemingly set there on purpose in straight lines. This impressive formation stretches a half-mile long with a pronounced hook at one end, and the stone can measure up to 13 feet across. According to Unsolved Mysteries in the World, the origin and meaning of Bimini are unknown. However, the name appears in the ancient Egyptian language, and Bamimini, which means homage, ini, to the soul, Ba, of Min, M-I-N, and M-I-N, Min, was the Egyptians' divine protector of travelers on far-off journeys, a particularly appropriate god to be worshipped at a distant Bimini, and if needed, the islands had been visited by voyagers from the Nile Valley. Now, in 1968, subsea archaeologist Joseph Mason Valentine and his diving party encountered the paved road, now called the Bimini Road or the Bimini Wall. Now, after their initial discovery, the site was visited often by innumerable divers, researchers, and scientists. A number of people came to this site, further revealing the existence of two additional linear features laying nearly parallel to the enigmatic path, to an entirely new road. This is where things get even more strange, because as Unexplained Mysteries writes, there could be a connection between this discovery and American mysticist Edgar Cayce. Now, if you don't know much about Edgar Cayce, buckle your seatbelts. Cayce was said to predict future events during trances. Another curious element of this mystery is a prediction that Cayce made in 1938. I'm quoting now from exactly his prophecy. Quote, a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini, expected in 68 or 69, not so far away. End quote. Well, guess what? The Bimini Road was discovered in 1968.
So that's pretty amazing with Edgar Casey. Great.
He's amazing. We got to do an episode on Edgar Casey.
You're absolutely
he's
right.
phenomenal. I met
Yes.
some lovely people not too long ago, and they dropped an Edgar Casey reference, and we became best friends. It was great.
There's a whole Edgar Casey Research Institute. There's amazing stuff. His books and everything is really great. I highly recommend people look into that. There's a lot of, I would say, validity because anyway, it is an amazing story. So look
Great
into that.
American Psychic. Yes, but as we look at what we just saw with those roads, I mean, some of them, they look like cinder blocks lined up. It's just, a lot of people say that those are natural formations. Still, a lot of these sites that we're going to show you today, the official view of them is that they're not man-made, or I just don't see how you can really argue that these are natural formations a lot of the times when they look like what we see above the water. It's just incredible.
And this goes back to what we started the episode with, which is why I was really harping on the geological evidence and just the idea that sea levels rose roughly around 300 feet worldwide in the last 12,500 years. So these sites would be then underwater. But look at these roadways, supposed roadways, and especially from the Bimini Islands to the Americas or potentially to somewhere else, it could absolutely, because these waters they're still pretty shallow. So they follow perfect as an example of, 12,500 years ago, these would have been above water. These would have been perfect places to put a roadway. And the fact that there's even a linguistic connection to Egypt, which is really probably one of the centerpieces of the whole planet, certainly has been in, let's say, like this 5,000-6,000 year period in human history. But also I would say perhaps that was an Atlantean, deposit pre-Ice
Absolutely.
Age.
If there was ever anything that was Atlantean, a lot of the Egyptians say that the pyramids were there before them too.
Yeah,
So
they are the descendants of Atlantis. They've said many, many times.
Right. And it makes sense. It really does make sense. I mean, I remember in history, we really brushed over the Egyptians and jumped right into the Greeks. And I wonder if that's because there are still so many question marks with the Egyptians, but yet so much mystery there. So
Yeah,
just very, very interesting stuff.
it's really cool stuff. So quickly, I wanted to go over to another underwater underwater site. These are the Cuban pyramids. Now, this is done with a sonar scanning technology, and I didn't want to get too much into the story because it kind of just drops off. These things got photographed just off the coast of Cuba, and then
Nothing to see here, folks.
and then just nothing really happened after that.
Nothing to see here. Just some underwater pyramids.
It's just, it happens a lot in archaeology. It happens a lot in a lot of areas, let's be honest, when major discoveries that could rewrite everything happen. It just gets brushed under the rug.
I don't know how much truth there is to it, but I heard about in South America, they found I think there was some like Roman ruins that they found and some coins, and they're like, you know what, never mind. we don't want this to be the history, so let's just keep moving. There were no Romans here, people.
Yeah, I swear. So on that matter, this is a really great archaeological website because it's the company that has led this underwater expedition. So you can go onto their website. Lots of great photos and information. I highly recommend checking it out. Frank Godillo is this underwater archaeologist, and this is one of his major projects, is this Thonis Heraclean site just off the coast of Egypt here in this general area. I believe the Nile's over to the right here. I think if I just open this up into a new link, it should show the larger map.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
for our
here's the
audience,
Nile onto your right.
the Mediterranean Sea is actually a hotbed of this topic, and it's almost like, oh, another day at the office. It's not as impressive as these other ones that aren't connected to high civilization like Egypt. But yeah, it's littered with old structures and old cities. What it looks like, it almost looks like the Mediterranean Sea was significantly smaller than it is today, and I can't believe it doesn't get more attention.
Yeah, I think it's just because they're discovering too many incredible things here, and again, it goes back to just the pretty incredible, sophisticated nature of these civilizations as well. Let's just look at some of the really amazing photos of what they have discovered. I mean, beautiful statues, large statues, clearly Egyptian, found in these areas. Let's see. I mean, big, big things here, just to give you perspective on the size. They don't know what god this is, but it's some Egyptian god or pharaoh. I mean, look at the size of these things. What do you think that block is as well? I don't know, but sophisticated stone. I mean, we did episodes on this before, just the absolute incredible construction, some gold, looks like some writing on this gold, but it's a whole treasure trove, but pretty large, sophisticated buildings and structures and just constructions in general. Look at this beautiful
Yeah,
slab
they're in
here.
pretty good shape too for being underwater. I mean, I'm surprised. I wonder if the pressure down there has kept them in good shape.
It's really hard to say. I mean, yeah, that's that's looking
Look at
almost
that.
brand new. It's pretty amazing, these
It's just a
different
coffee table
discoveries.
now. No big
Yeah,
deal.
exactly. No big deal. I mean, these are beautiful, amazing, huge statues that have been clearly found. So it just goes back to showing you that there's so much to be looking, not just on the surface, and there is, but also underwater. Because why? Well, 12,500 years ago, a lot of these places weren't underwater and absolutely would have had sophisticated civilizations living in them. And here is just more evidence of that. Look at the size of this head here. That's a
Jeez
huge statue.
Louise. Yeah, it's not that's not a paperweight for sure.
No, it's really not. So that's just another. This is just a really fantastic. Yeah, it's not the most juicy as like the Bimini Roads, which is Atlantis and this and that, but we don't even know necessarily what this is connected to. We just know
But
that
it
there's a
should be
treasure
juicy.
trove.
It should be juicy. I think the reason why it's not juicy is because I think you were talking about that collective consciousness kind of, we had shared trauma and that might be actually like inherited into us. Well, I think we have an inherited sense of amazement with the Egyptians. And I think that the fact that their ruins spread out into the sea is like, oh, wow. I mean, it was Egypt. I mean, they were up to tons of stuff. It's just like, no, it is incredible. It changes timelines. It rewrites our history a bit. And the craftsmanship there too. It's like, even if you were to push it back to the beginning of their civilization, it's still too good. It's too good to be true almost. It's amazing.
Because
So
when
stay
you
curious.
absolutely stay curious and open-minded here, because it doesn't even take that much to really, I mean, we've got so much evidence now to support this. It's like that Egyptian set of ruins that we just found in the Mediterranean Sea there, like that still has to ask the question, well, when was that sea above water and not underwater? And when you push it back geologically, we keep pushing back the date of these places and the incredible sophistication in which they were building 6,000, 8,000 plus years ago. I mean, that's the issue that a lot of these establishments have, that they're like, oh crap. I mean, it really is rewriting history. And there's just such an interesting, let's say, roadblock to going down in that direction. So let's look at our final example for today's episode. There's a lot out there, folks. Let us know in the comments, of course, after you've liked and subscribed, of course, to the channel. Let us know in the comments what you have discovered that we have not put in this episode, because there's lots and lots and lots. The last one we're going to look at today is the Yonaguni Monument underwater, just off the coast of Japan. This one gets a lot of it's natural. We'll let you be the judge, and we're just going to watch a little bit of this video, which goes through some of the photographs and Google Earth images.
Go. The structure measures roughly 150 meters in length, 50 meters wide, and 27 meters tall. The top of the monument is just a few meters from the surface of the water. So what exactly does this monument or underwater pyramid actually look like? If you're contemplating whether or not this structure is truly man-made or natural, here are a few interesting elements of the structure. At first glance, it may appear to be a cliff or a rock protruding from the seabed, but upon closer inspection, the monument is cut into a series of geometric shapes, including flat planes, broad horizontal surfaces, parallel faces, and even right angles. Specific aspects of that tend to point towards human influence, including pillars, a stone column, what appears to be a road, staircases, and even a rock shaped like a turtle. Professor Kimura believes certain significant structures can be identified at Yonaguni Monument, such as castles, roads, and a stadium. Although no official government agencies have carried out research on the site until now, there are a few theories on the age of the site based on its depth and location. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura of Ryukyu University first estimated the monument's age to be at least 10,000 years old. This is based on the timing of the last ice age, when the site should have been located above water as part of a land bridge that connected to modern-day Taiwan. If the site were indeed built 10,000 years ago, this would predate some of the oldest structures on our planet, such as the Great Pyramids of Giza and even Stonehenge. Aside from
So again, I'm just going to stop it there because then we can get into speculation. Well, how do we really know the age of the pyramids / Stonehenge as well? Those are just as much mysteries. But I love how they, even with official academics and scientists, are saying that this would have been. And of course, I would not expect, but I have a bit more faith in non-Western academics and scientists when it comes to this kind of research. Certainly in South America and Central America, they're a lot more open-minded with these things, and they'll say the actual evidence and the things that come back, which this is the obvious thing, is that it would be around 10,000 years old based on what? Geology. So
Yeah, Japan's got a pretty deep connection with their ancient history too. So, although I am pretty sure that if you were to Google Yonaguni, the official, like, Google will be like, it's a natural structure.
well, Google, of course, is being,
It's natural. Nothing to see here, guys. There's no
right.
mysteries.
They'll fact check it, and Wikipedia will say what it's going to say, and the pseudoscientists like Graham
Right.
Hancock and things.
But I mean, it's there. That's the cool part, is it's just like there, people have gone down, they visit it, they study it. The government is now starting to get involved. That's always good to hear. I mean, let's figure out some of these mysteries, because they are underwater. They're remnants of our past as a global resident of this planet. And it's just, it's the testament to how mighty and advanced we once were. I mean, those structures were quite large and in charge to be underwater. No one's just accidentally dropping that in there, and you're not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you could build it underwater. Maybe the world is completely different. But I mean, yeah, look at these right angles. Look at these staircases. Just incredible stuff.
It's the right angles. A big thing, for as an amateur archaeologist, you really, one of the easiest ways to find these phenomenon in nature is to find right angles.
Well, if you took that out of water, put that in the desert, people would be like, oh, it's a ruin.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
It's just, and this is what I would love to do if there's one takeaway from this episode, is just to break this myth of, like, if it's underwater, it has to be natural. Absolutely not. And especially now that we have really great geological evidence to support that this, not so long ago in geological time, was above water. And humans, we know, have been around at least 250,000 years. So that's more than enough time for us to have built these structures.
Yeah, our contemporary timeline on humans, it's a little disrespectful.
Yeah,
Really.
seriously.
It really is. I mean, we are incredible creatures. And it's funny that we're in the modern age now, where the narrative is that we've never been more advanced, and we have the internet and we're capable of so much, but yet ultimately what we get told is kind of that we can't accomplish that much. I mean, but if you look around the world, we've accomplished so much.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's a bit of I don't know, a prejudice, I'll say at the very least, how we look at ourselves in the past. Anatomically, in terms of the way that our brains are made and our bodies are made, has not changed for 250,000 years. We're just as smart today as we were 250,000 years ago. So why were we clubbing each other over the heads with clubs and stones in the Stone Age?
Like you.
Yeah.
Take you.
Why was that the story for, I don't know, the last 240 to 245,000 years? And then 6,000 years ago, like out of nowhere, Mesopotamian civilization just sprout out of nowhere, and all of a sudden we're doing math and astronomy. It's like, come on, guys, that makes no
And why are our
sense.
buildings falling down and are in constant disrepair? Our roads are just falling apart everywhere. There's construction crews everywhere, but yet the further back you go, people are still using Roman roads. We find ziggurats. I mean, there's just so. If there was not high civilization, they were great at guessing, because they were amazingly accurate at so many things.
I know. So it's that's just something I wanted to leave you beautiful folks with for this episode, and just something to think about. What are the possibilities if we really can allow ourselves to, let's say, ponder the idea that we were at least one time before this, sophisticated and advanced, probably multiple times in that 250 years that we at least know about right now, as long as we've been around here. How many times has this civilization rose and then fallen and then risen again and then fallen? Like, how many times do you think this probably has already happened in our history? What round are we on? Is this humanity 15.0, 2.0? Let us know in the comments. Where do you think we're even at right now as a civilization? And what can we maybe do to not fall down again? Are there things that we could do perhaps to sustain civilization? Maybe was that why the pyramids were built all around the world, was to perhaps create a more stable situation on Earth so that there wouldn't be these cataclysms? I don't know. Let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this? And speaking of which, I do want to bring up, which we didn't do before the episode, Brandon, but I can quickly pull up some of the comments that you beautiful folks have left us on our YouTube channel here. This is where we get most of the comments, although we have moved over. Yes.
Bring it in. This is my favorite segment. You, the people. Let's go. You're the best part of the show for us, is seeing your interactions with our content. We love it. We're above 700 subscribers. Why don't you share this around? We can get to 1,000 in a week with your support. If you like our content, if you like hanging out with Brandon and Chris and just sitting by this fireside chat, share it around. 1,000 subscribers. If we do 1,000 subscribers, we're going to do an extra episode that week. We'll do something special. We'll figure it out, Chris. We'll reward you. Okay. We want to get there with you. Share it around. Like, subscribe, pass it around like a hot potato. Let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon, for that. And
what quote do you have? Are we doing the Coral Castle?
Yeah, there's a lot of great comments. It's funny, we don't these days we're not getting too many views on the videos, but we're getting so many comments. It's so clear that there's engagement, so clear that there's obviously a group of us, and that would be including you who's watching this, that care about these topics, that want to get in on the conversation, and YouTube is a great place to do that. And so that's where we're pulling from. And it's tough to find. It's not tough to find. It's tough to choose because there's so many great comments here. But let's see now. I think we can pull out. Let's
this one. Several days ago, this is from Rob Lundy.
Okay, great.
Several days ago, I watched a YouTube testimony for someone who witnessed a small, slender alien land on his property, what appeared to be a round globe ship. an entity emerged from the artist's rendition, outfitted in a tight uniform, helmet with a breathing apparatus, holding a small cone in his right arm. That's the link to the Coral Castle. I was baffled until I watched your current YouTube introducing the cone, same shape as the artist's sketch in the alien holding one. So that cone he's referring to was perhaps a piece of technology used to get weightlessness in large granite rocks and coral rocks. It's also depicted in a lot of Sumerian artwork as well, and I would probably guess that you see that as well in Egypt. So, Rob, thank you so much for your comment on that. That's amazing. Do you have any other ones you want to highlight there, Chris?
Oh, that's great. I think, well, I like doing one an episode, and that's great. Rob Lundy 1701 was chiming in with that, and it's so true. Rob had some other really great comments, I think, on that episode as well, and on other episodes that have really shared a lot of, again, more like personal perspectives on these things, and it always gives us a little extra boost to our research to hear from you beautiful folk how you've experienced your life. And sometimes we get really poignant comments on people that have experienced things, and that's what I love. Like, share the research, share everything, but especially your experiences. When you know someone who's had something happen to them, or yourself personally, that can relate to these curious topics that we like to go over here, it really helps us out. So thank you for sharing that, everyone. And great to shout out Mr. Rob Lundy there. Thanks for your comment.
Mr. Rob Lundy, ladies and gentlemen. Well, look, to the rest of our beautiful audience, we hope you are having a wonderful day. Hopefully this podcast has enlightened that day, enriched that day. Have a wonderful week. Check out some past episodes of ours. If you're just new to the channel, there's lots of great information there. And it's just such a thrill to have you on, sitting around this nice little fireside chat with us. Chris, you want to say anything, any last words to our beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, talented, smart, strong, stunning audience?
Yes, these are the affirmations you can all live by. Beautiful folk, not only do you get educated and enlightened here on Ancient Mysteries on Earth, but you're also going to get some serious compliments and a nice little ego boost. We're just going to pump those tires for you beautiful folk. You're doing great. We'll leave it at that, Brandon. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will be sure to catch you on the next episode of Ancient Mysteries on Earth Fireside Chats.
Stay kind. Stay curious.
Take care, everyone.